March, we noted the small difference between the OLS revenue forecast and the revenue projections contained in the governor's budget message. But I added, the real question ought not be whether OLS or the executives are more accurate in their current forecasts, but rather whether the similar pictures we paint are accurate. The hardest thing in revenue forecasting is the accurate anticipation of the turns or pivots in the economy. At that time, I discussed two revenue sources about which we had real forecasting concerns. About the corporation business tax, I said a significant rebound this year is likely given the low base last April and national reports of improved corporate profits. OLS forecast is slightly more cautious than the executives, who would also require significant growth and a return to a strong fourth quarter. We are both banking on the CBT reaching a turning point this spring, a turning point which is not yet clearly visible in the data. And when discussing the gross income tax, I noted that our annual concern about an April surprise was compounded this year by uncertainty about the effect of tax rate changes and mixed economic signals. While each of these warnings proved appropriate, the net impact of the state's resources is distinctly positive. The corporation business tax did not experience the turnaround it was anticipated in April, neither in New Jersey nor elsewhere. And we are reducing our forecast for the CBT in both fiscal year 2011 and fiscal year 2012. In the current year, we're projecting $2.2 billion, $190 million less than the governor's budget message. And for 2012, we now anticipate $2.33 billion, $253 million less than the governor's budget message. This loss of $443 million is more than offset by a remarkable development for the gross income tax. In a pattern that was evident in Washington and in the capitals of our sister states, April income tax payments for tax year 2010 far exceeded expectations. As a result, we've increased our income tax forecast to $10.7 billion this year, $634 million above the governor's budget message, and $11.34 billion, $812 million above GBM for fiscal year 2012. To summarize, over the 2 years, we expect $1.446 billion more from the income tax and $443 million less from the corporation business tax than was anticipated in the governor's budget message. A number of smaller differences, more down than up, produce a total 2-year forecast for OLS that is $914 million higher than the governor's budget message. A more detailed set of revenue tables will be provided after the treasurer testifies this afternoon. Obviously, a simplified version is in the material that you have before you. So what happened? As we've noted in the past, the corporation business tax is the hardest revenue to forecast. As was shown this year, there's often little correlation between corporate profits that are reported publicly and the profits on which corporations have a tax liability. There are so many avenues by which corporations can shift and reduce tax liability that one commentator has referred to it as a voluntary tax. Now, I should point out that the CBT reduction is against what was anticipated in the governor's budget message. We are seeing, excluding the energy component of CBT, an increase in both years, about 5% this year, about 7% next year. But that's less than the budget had assumed. I believe we have a clearer explanation for the gross income tax surge. Just after we appeared here in March, we received detailed information on tax year 2009 tax payments, showing marked declines for high-income taxpayers. Between tax year 2007 and tax year 2009, the number of returns reporting $1 million in income declined by 33%. And the income reported on those declines, on those returns, declined by 43%. And despite the 1-year rate increase applicable to that year, the so-called millionaire's tax, the tax liability of those taxpayers declined by 37%. What is clear to us now, but was less clear back in March, is the extent to which the collapse of the income tax during this recession was focused at the high end. Between 2007 and 2009, those are tax years which correspond roughly to fiscal years 2008 and 2010, the total charged tax for all resident taxpayers declined by $1.7 billion. Of this amount, $1.3 billion was a decline in tax liability for people with incomes over $1 million. In contrast, taxpayers below $500,000 accounted for only $228 million of the decline. The takeaway from these facts is that while the recession has had terrible consequences for many middle and lower income New Jersey residents, it was the loss of income for wealthier New Jerseyans that sunk our income tax collections. We knew that the wealthiest 1/2 of 1%, who pay about 1/3 of the income tax, were important. But we had not anticipated that their fortunes would account for more than 3/4 of the revenue decline. And it is the flip side of that coin that is appearing in our revenue collections now. In trying to explain the vigor of the rebound during what appears to be a lackluster economic recovery, we compared the historic pattern of high-end income to the performance of the stock market. The graph included in this testimony illustrates the extraordinarily high degree of association between the S&P 500 index and the total income on returns reporting at least $1 million. In that graph you have before you the colored bars, the dark bars running from 1989 through 2009 represent actual data on the income on returns above $1 million. The two white bars are projections that we did based on the pattern that we've observed for those other years. And the 2010 bar is consistent with the final payments that we saw this April. So that would appear to be what we're looking at. It is difficult to look at this graph and not conclude that the performance of the stock market is the factor which drives the volatility of our income tax. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, this graph may be worth $1 billion. As the members of this committee work to craft the fiscal year 2012 Appropriations Act over the next 6 weeks, the staff of the Office of Legislative Services stands ready to provide whatever assistance you may require.